Texto Pedro. It was a warm, sunny Saturday afternoon. The small chapel was decorated with white roses, their sweet fragrance filling the air. Guests chatted animatedly, dressed in their best clothes as they waited for the ceremony to begin. The atmosphere was full of joy and expectation. It was the wedding day of Emily and John, the perfect couple that everyone admired. John was at the altar, looking dapper in his black tuxedo. He smiled nervously as he adjusted his tie for the third time. His godfather whispered, "Relax, she'll be here any minute." John nodded, but his palms were sweating. The truth was that Emily was late. Outside the chapel, Sarah, Emily's best friend and godmother, checked her phone. "She didn't care," Sarah murmured, biting her lip. She sent another message. "Emily, are you okay? Everyone is waiting." Minutes passed, and whispers began to spread through the crowd. "Where is the bride?" someone asked. John's smile faltered as he glanced at the door, expecting to see Emily walk in at any moment. The organist began to play softly, then stopped, not knowing what to do. Sarah walked over to John and whispered, "She be here soon." "Right?" John didn't respond. The priest cleared his throat and approached John. "Shall we wait a little longer?" he asked gently. John hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, please. Just a few more minutes." But those minutes stretched longer and longer. The excitement in the room turned to discomfort. Sarah, now pacing back and forth in the back of the chapel, looked at her phone, waiting for a call or text. Instead, nothing came. As tension filled the room, John's phone vibrated in his pocket. He quickly took it out and saw a message. It was from Emily. "I'm sorry, John. I can't do that." John looked at the phone, his hands shaking as he read the message again. "I'm sorry, John. I can't do that." The words felt like a punch to his chest. He looked at Sarah, his face pale and confused. "She texted me," he said calmly, his voice breaking. "What? What did she say?" Sarah ran, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. John handed her the phone without saying a word. Sarah's eyes widened as she read the message. "That doesn't make sense," she muttered, shaking her head. "Emily wouldn't leave like that. Something is wrong. We need to find her." John nodded, struggling to process what was happening. But where could she be? She was so excited about today. Why would she run away? Sarah grabbed his arm. "Let's start with the park. You know how much she loves that place? It's where you proposed, remember?" John hesitated, then agreed. "Okay, let's go." The two left the chapel, leaving the murmuring guests and the confused priest behind. Outside, the bright sunlight felt surreal against the heavy weight of her emotions. As they arrived at the park, memories of happier times flooded John's mind. He could still imagine Emily's smile when she said yes to his proposal under the same oak tree they now stood under. But today there was no sign of her. "Emily!" Sarah shouted, her voice echoing through the silent park. John joined her, shouting her name, but there was no response. A woman walking her dog approached them. "Are you looking for someone?" she asked gently. "Yes," John replied quickly. "Did you see a woman in a white dress?" "She's about this height with long brown hair." The woman shook her head. "No, I didn't. I am really sorry." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. Maybe she went to her favorite coffee shop. She always said it was her place to think. John's expression brightened a little. "Yes, that is possible. Let's check there." As they ran to the coffee shop, John couldn't shake the growing uneasiness in his chest. What if they didn't find her? What if she didn't want to be found? At the cafe, the barista recognized Emily's name immediately. "Oh, Emily?" "She got here early," she said, pointing to a corner table. She ordered her usual latte and sat there for about an hour, but she left in a hurry. John and Sarah exchanged worried looks. "Did she say anything?" Sarah asked. The barista frowned, trying to remember. "Not a lot. She just seemed distracted, as if I were deep in thought." "Did she mention where she was going?" John pressed, his desperation growing. The barista shook her head. "Sorry, no. She didn't say." Sarah placed a comforting hand on John's shoulder. "We will find her. Let's try the lake later." As they left the coffee shop, John's mind raced. Why did Emily go there and leave so quickly? Was she trying to tell them something without saying it directly? Uncertainty hung over them as they headed toward the lake, the mystery of Emily's disappearance growing with each step. At the edge of the lake, John and Sarah stopped to catch their breath. The water was calm, reflecting the golden glow of the late afternoon sun. A few ducks floated lazily, completely oblivious to the turmoil swirling inside John's mind. "Why here?" John muttered, scanning the shore. She never talked about this place. Sarah thought for a moment. Maybe she wanted to be somewhere quiet, to think, or maybe she left a clue we haven't noticed yet. As they walked along the trail, Sarah suddenly remembered something Emily had said a few weeks ago. She mentioned that she wanted to visit the lake, but I thought it was just for fun. She said she liked the idea of water symbolizing new beginnings. "Do you think she's trying to tell us something?" John stopped halfway. "New beginnings? Does that mean she's leaving for good?" His voice cracked with a mixture of anger and sadness. "Not necessarily," Sarah replied carefully, "but it seems like she's struggling with something and maybe she felt overwhelmed. Sarah turned to face John. Think about the last time you spoke to her. Did she seem nervous or upset? John frowned, trying to remember. She was quiet the night before the wedding, but I thought it was just normal pre-wedding jitters. I asked her if she was okay, and she said, "I'm fine, but now, I wonder if she was hiding something." They sat on a bench near the water, feeling the weight of the situation weighing down on them. "Let's break it down," Sarah said, adopting a more analytical tone. "She sent you that message. She went to the park, then to the coffee shop, and now possibly here. There is a pattern. Every place means something to her. What's the connection?" John thought for a moment, then his eyes widened. They were all places where she felt safe or had great moments in her life. The park was where we got engaged. The coffee shop was his favorite place to think. The lake, Sarah finished the thought, represents change. She's trying to figure out something important. As the sun sank lower in the sky, John and Sarah continued walking along the lakeshore, the sound of gravel crunching beneath their feet. Suddenly, Sarah spotted something unusual near a bench overlooking the water. "John, look," she exclaimed, pointing to a small object shining in the light of the setting sun. They ran and found a delicate silver bracelet lying on the floor. John recognized her immediately. "This is Emily's," he said, picking it up and turning it over in his hands. "I gave it to her for her birthday last year." "She never takes it off." Sarah frowned. "If she dropped it here, she must have been in a hurry. But why?" John noticed a folded piece of paper tucked under the bracelet. His heart raced as he carefully unfolded it. The note was written in Emily's handwriting. "I needed time to think. I love you, but I feel lost. Meet me where it all began." Sarah gasped. "Where did it all start? Does she mean—" "The library," John said immediately. "It was there that we met for the first time. She was reading Pride and Prejudice, and I asked her about it. She will be there." Without wasting another moment, John and Sarah headed to the library. As they drove, John's mind raced with questions. Why was Emily feeling lost? Had he not noticed signs of her unhappiness? He clutched the bracelet tightly in his hand, determined to get answers. When they reached the library, the building was silent, its tall windows glowing softly in the twilight. John and Sarah pushed open the heavy wooden doors and entered. There, sitting at a table near the back, was Emily. She was still wearing her wedding dress, her veil slightly askew and her face buried in her hands. "Emily," John called softly. She looked up, her eyes red from crying. "John, you came." John ran over, kneeling beside her. Of course I came. Emily, what's going on? Why did you leave? Emily took a deep breath, her hands shaking. I'm sorry, John. I didn't want to hurt you. I felt like everything was happening so fast, and I wasn't sure if I was ready. I love you, but I needed to make sure this was what I really wanted. John sat next to Emily, his heart aching as he watched her struggle to find the right words. He gently took her hands in his. Emily, he began softly, why didn't you tell me you were feeling this way? We could have talked about this together. Emily looked away, tears streaming down her face. I was scared, John, afraid you'd think I didn't love you or that I wasn't committed. But the truth is, I started to feel lost, like I was losing myself in the process of planning this wedding. Everything became about perfection, and I forgot what really mattered, us. John's grip on his hands tightened. Emily, you don't have to be perfect. None of this needs to be perfect. I don't care about the big wedding or the flowers or anything else. I just want to be with you. That's what matters to me. Emily's lips trembled and she let out a shaky breath. I know. Deep down, I know this. But I needed this moment to remind myself why I said yes to you in the first place. Sarah, who was standing nearby silently, stepped forward. Emily, you have always been someone who follows your heart, and that brought you here. So now the question is, what does your heart say? Emily looked at John, her tear-stained face softening. It says I still want to marry you. Not because of marriage, but because I love you. A wave of relief washed over John, and he pulled her into a tight hug. Then, let's do this. Forget the big ceremony. Let's do it our way, with the people we love. Emily nodded, a small smile appearing through her tears. Yes, let's start from scratch. Sarah clapped her hands. Well, I'm still in my bridesmaid dress, so let's make it happen. The three laughed, the tension finally dissipating. Together they left the library, ready to begin a new chapter of their lives, this time on their own terms. The next morning, in the golden light of dawn, Emily and John stood together in Sarah's backyard. The setting was simple, string lights strung between the trees, and a handful of close friends and family gathered around. The air was filled with a silent joy, a far cry from the chaos of the previous day. Emily wore a soft, ivory dress borrowed from Sarah, her hair tied back with a delicate ribbon. John stood next to her in his suit, the same one he had worn to chapel, but now it felt right. The officiant smiled warmly as she began. Sometimes life doesn't go as planned, but love has a way of finding its way, even through the unexpected. Emily squeezed John's hand, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. As they exchanged vows, their words weren't rehearsed or polished. They were honest and raw, reflecting everything they had been through. "I promise to love you," John said, his voice firm, "not for who they expect you to be, but for who you are, imperfect, real, and the woman I can't imagine my life without." Emily blinked back tears, smiling as she replied, "And I promise to love you, not for the grand gestures or perfect moments, but for the quiet moments, the messy moments, and the ones that make life worth living." As they exchanged rings, the small group of guests broke into applause, their cheers echoing through the morning air. Sarah wiped away a tear, her usual confident demeanor softened by emotion. Later, as everyone gathered around an impromptu breakfast, Emily turned to John. "Thank you for waiting for me, for understanding." John kissed her forehead. "Thank you for coming back to me, for choosing us." The two sat together, watching their loved ones laughing and talking around them. It wasn't the grand wedding they had planned, but it was exactly what they needed, a celebration of love, resilience, and a future built on trust. And as the sun rose, they knew this was the beginning of their happiest chapter yet. If you liked the video, like, share, and subscribe to be part of our community and never miss a new story. Until the next video,